What is going on, YouTube and Fantasy Football Nation everywhere? It is time to literally pull the curtain back. It is time to kick off another football season and fantasy football season. This is the Fantasy Football Stock Report for your league, your team, your game. This is your home. Chris Pearson here with you, as always, for the 2015-2016 edition. I could not be more excited to kick off the year. We did the post-draft show a couple months ago. That seems like a long time ago now. Time has just been flying this year. But finally, it is time to start the season. A lot of stuff's going on in the off-season. The preseason injuries, which I want to discuss briefly on this. Of course, I did my video couple days ago on the Deflategate situation and my thoughts on RG3. So a lot has been taking place and more stories are coming out about that actually. I won't really talk about that in this video. I want to focus, of course, here on the football and preparing your guys' teams for the upcoming Week 1 games. Lot to get to, lot to discuss, so we will jump right in on that. But I do want to discuss how these injuries this preseason, a lot of injuries happened, including to some big name guys, and definitely affected teams going forward. The big two were Jordy Nelson in Green Bay and Kelvin Benjamin in Carolina. Both those guys suffer season-ending torn ACLs, so very difficult situation. Obviously, the top receiving option for both Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay and Cam Newton in Carolina. But I think at the end of the day, it's really going to affect one more than it is the other. I think it's going to affect Cam Newton in Carolina more than it's going to affect Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers still has a lot of weapons. You still got Randall Cobb, who is still expected to play in Week 1 despite banging up his shoulder in the last preseason game. He is still expected to play Week 1. And the Packers re-signed James Jones, who was a very vital option in Green Bay during his time there. To me, that was really a no-shocker after the Giants released him. So that will be huge. Obviously, now it decreases the likelihood that Davante Adams, who was expected to get a huge uprise in targets with Nelson out, that kind of maybe drops his numbers and projection a little bit. But I still think he's going to get a lot of weapons there. So now you've got your main three as Cobb, Adams, and definitely James Jones. It definitely hurts the prospects of the young guys like Jeff Janis and Ty Montgomery. But I think in the long run, those three are going to be your main three weapons in Green Bay, and they're going to be good starting options for you, especially Cobb if he's healthy, and Davante Adams every single week. And I think you can get away with putting in James Jones as a number 3 receiver for your team. So if he wasn't already owned in your league, or if he's out there on waivers, go get James Jones. I think he could be a pretty reliable option because he's familiar with the system in Green Bay. He knows how the system works. So this seems like a really good fit. Now on the downside, for Cam Newton in Carolina, this is huge. Kelvin Benjamin was really the only, outside of Greg Olsen at tight end, was really the only elite option that the Carolina Panthers had. They really behind him have a bunch of young guys, unknown guys. Now, Devin Funchess, the rookie out of Michigan, is going to be expected to step up, but he's also dealing with injury issues. I think he's a hamstring issue right now, so he's banged up. And it's just a bunch of unknown commodities behind him. I think like the two starters are like Philly Brown and Ted Ginn, I think, or something like that. Are the two guys that are going to be starting this week. So it's going to be tough. Now, the thing with Carolina, though, is that this week they have a dream matchup against Jacksonville. So you want to take advantage of that. You want to be starting, obviously, Newton, Jonathan Stewart at running back, and Greg Olsen. But outside of those core three, I don't think you can start either Panther right now until a real top receiving threat emerges, if that happens at all. As we all know, the committee system is a pain for fantasy owners because of the fact that you just don't know who's going to emerge from that group. It's a mess that should just be unavoided until one emerges. Now, if I were to venture a guess and say of that bunch who's going to emerge, I'm hoping it would be Devin Funchess because, again, being the young rookie, I would hope that he would have a little bit more pressure placed on him to get a lot of targets in the Carolina offense. But you never know. You never know until we see what happens with this first game of the season. So for now, I would just focus on those core three in Carolina. Newton, Stewart, as long as he remains healthy, and Greg Olsen. Keep those guys in your lineups, especially for this week with Jacksonville matchup for you. But in the long run, Carolina's going to have to do a lot more with their receiving core, I think, than Green Bay is, because Green Bay at least had so many more reliable weapons behind Jordy Nelson that they could rely on. Carolina doesn't have that yet. So a lot there regarding those two injury situations. And the other big thing that happened is when we got the cut downs from 75 to 53. A lot of surprising names that were cut, and some more things coming out of that. Some of the big names, Fred Jackson being released by the Buffalo Bills. That was certainly a surprise. He had spent 9 years in Buffalo, but he quickly landed in Seattle, so now he's in the Seahawks system, because the Seahawks let go of Christine Michael, who was the handcuff to Marshawn Lynch, but now Michael is in Dallas, so that just muddies that ongoing situation. That muddles that backfield, which I will also say is one to avoid, so we figure out that there's a concrete number one, because then you got Joseph Randall, Darren McFadden, Lance Dunbar, and Christine Michael. That's just a muddy situation there in Dallas. Although with that offensive line, whoever emerges as the number one in Dallas is going to be a stud, at least RB2. So for now, that's a mess. Now, Matt Castle was released by Buffalo, but today they re-signed him, and according to Rex Ryan, he will be the number 2 behind Tyrod Taylor. So it just seems odd that the team would release him and have E.J. Manuel as the 2, and then decide to bring him right back. I just found that a little bit odd, but it's Rex Ryan, so really what more can you say about that situation? There were some other, those were really the big ones. Monty Ball being released by Denver, to me, that's not shocking, because Monty Ball has just been a disappointment ever since he was drafted in the NFL. He's never panned out in Denver. He's been leapfrogged by Ronnie Hillman and C.J. Anderson. He's more of a plotting running back. He may end up landing somewhere, but I doubt he's going to have any fantasy relevancy unless he lands in the right situation. Jonas Gray being released by New England, that also was a big surprise to me as well. A lot of teams are going to be looking at him as a potential add. He probably won't be on the free agent list, the waiver list for very long now. I think Monty Ball did clear waivers, and nobody picked him up, so that's, again, a non-shocker. But Jonas Gray, I think, definitely is going to be looked at. But again, with New England, so now New England's going to rely on, with LeGarrette Blount suspended for the opener, you're not going to have LeGarrette Blount, remember, this week. They're going to be relying on Brandon Bolden and James White as I think maybe one of the guys that primary backs this week. So kind of a mess there again in New England, although maybe you could get away with White as a flex option. Travaris Cadet is also going to be in the mix potentially for that kind of third down back spot. So, but for now, I really would avoid that situation. So there's a lot of big names that got cut. There were a lot of kickers that got cut also that were surprising. Nick Novak got cut from San Diego, and the young guy Lembo now takes over his spot there. So I believe Caleb Sturgis was cut from Miami also. Connor Barth, cut from Denver, but he ended up, I think, landing back in Tampa Bay. So just a lot of surprises out there. But now we really need, with all that now sorted out and figured out, eventually some of these situations will play themselves out, and we'll monitor it throughout the year. But we really want to now focus on Week 1, getting your team a victory this week, starting off the season on the right foot. Now, I'm a prime example. Usually sometimes it takes a while for players to gel and teams to gel that you've put together, and you might not get off to the best of starts. But here's the thing. Yes, you want to have a good Week 1 roster, but at the end of the day, it might not be the roster you have further on down the line. The waiver wire sometimes can be your best friend. In Week 1, though, what you really want to do is you want to start the guys usually that you've drafted to be your starting guys, but also you want to take advantage of juicy matchups. You want to take advantage of some situations that really have an opportunity to get a lot of fantasy points. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on when I look through some of the rankings for this week. I really want to mention some of the guys that I think can really take advantage of some very good matchups. So if you're at a dilemma where you might not think your starter has a reliable matchup, you might maybe just want to take a chance and plug in the guy that has a really good matchup. Like for me, at my RB2, I'm torn this week between Melvin Gordon and Doug Martin. Melvin Gordon, yes, is a rookie for San Diego who struggled in the preseason going up against Detroit. And while Detroit's defense is not the same as it once was, that's kind of a risky thing to plug in a rookie for the first week. However, I did draft him to be my second running back. But then I got Doug Martin on my bench with a great matchup against Tennessee. And that may seem juicy on the surface, but I don't want to do anything too crazy in the first week. But again, the temptation to play Martin might just be too much. So I'm really torn on that situation this week. So I'm kind of consulting again other fantasy sites out there, seeing what they say, what their rankings show as well. So it might be at the end of the day where I decide, okay, Martin's matchup just looks too good. I'm going to plug him in because Gordon's been struggling in this matchup. But again, also the fact that the positive of playing Gordon is I got two players playing in that San Diego-Detroit matchup. I got him and Calvin Johnson, so having them both on the field at the same time, there's a lot of factors to take into account. There's a lot of things you have to look at. So let's just go ahead and jump right in and start analyzing here. The first 5 players, in terms of, and this is based on CBS projection, and I'm just kind of sharing my thoughts on these. The top 3 are really a given regardless of matchup. And Aaron Rodgers, I mean, you could not ask for a better matchup for Aaron Rodgers at quarterback in Week 1 going against the Bears. The Bears are simply terrible. They were 5-11 last year, so that's a great Week 1 matchup. Peyton Manning against Baltimore, and of course with Tom Brady being able to play in the Thursday night opener against Pittsburgh, you're obviously going to start him in this Week 1 matchup. Those are your top 3. I don't really disagree with any of those. But the next 2 are very intriguing because, again, these 2 are really good matchups that I think these 2 are going to exploit. And that's Russell Wilson of Seattle going up against St. Louis and Ryan Tannehill of Miami going up against Washington. This is probably going to be Ryan Tannehill's one of his, if not his best matchup all season. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Ryan Tannehill is going to produce this year. I'm very, very high on him because, again, he's got a lot of new weapons there in Miami with Jarvis Landry now being his top guy. Mike Wallace is gone. He's in Minnesota. Jarvis Landry there. Devontae Parker, when he gets healthy at wide receiver. I'm very intrigued to see what he's going to bring to the table in Miami. So with all these new weapons there. So I'm very high on Tannehill. He's projected for 21. I think certainly that is attainable. If you have Ryan Tannehill and you are not sold, if you have someone maybe you thought maybe drafted above him and I'm not sold on him has a tougher matchup as your starter, it might not be a bad idea to plug in Ryan Tannehill for this match just because the opportunity is there for him to get a lot of fantasy points. Next 5 on the list, again, all quarterbacks. Matt Ryan, Carson Palmer, Tony Romo, Cam Newton, Andrew Luck. Again, I mentioned Cam Newton. It's a great matchup against Jacksonville. Again, and thinking about Cam Newton is his running ability is also very strong. And the times they don't use Jonathan Stewart, Cam Newton's going to run the football. So, again, not a bad matchup for at least this matchup. There'll be other times when he's not a QB1, but I think for this matchup you can get away with that. Love Matt Ryan against Philly. I think that Philly-Atlanta game, yes, Atlanta's defense is not the best, but Matt Ryan still has his weapons, still has Julio Jones. Now, Roddy White's availability is going to be in question with that elbow issue, but he still has Leonard Hankerson. The running back situation, how is it going to pan out there for Atlanta? We'll see in due time, but I still got the weapons there around him, so I don't think you have to be afraid to sit Matt Ryan there. Carson Palmer, the big thing with Carson Palmer, as long as he can stay healthy. If Carson Palmer is upright for all 16 games, he's going to have very good fantasy appeal. And the Saints matchup this week is definitely good for him. That's going to be a shootout game, I think, with New Orleans and Arizona. I would say start probably anybody of your studs in that New Orleans-Arizona game that you normally would rely on to draft as starting guys, especially Carson Palmer. He runs the Arizona offense like clockwork. It is amazing how effective he is there. And he's going to get John Brown involved. He's going to get Larry Fitzgerald involved. Michael Floyd, as long as he's healthy, he might not play this week because of the finger issue, but so as long as he's healthy and upright, he's going to be productive. You can't afford to sit Romo when he's healthy, and of course Andrew Luck. So I think any of those 5 again also solid options. But I like Palmer probably more out of that bunch, and Newton just because of the matchups. Next 5, Phillip Rivers, Colin Kaepernick, Sam Bradford, Jay Cutler, Ben Roethlisberger. I'm starting Sam Bradford in one of my other leagues. Bradford, again, going up against Atlanta, that is just a massive matchup to have there. Again, even though it's on the road, it's an exploitable matchup. Again, the thing with Bradford, though, is if he can stay healthy. That's the key. If he can stay healthy, that's the key. So I love Bradford's matchup. Rivers against Detroit, that's exploitable. Again, the Detroit defense, not what it once was. It's still going to be tough, but Rivers still has plenty of weapons there. He won't have Antonio Gates for the first 4 games, of course, because of the suspension, but he still has Danny Woodhead out of the backfield on 3rd down, still has Keenan Allen, going to get Ladarius Green involved, so still a lot of weapons there. Roethlisberger against New England. That New England-Pittsburgh game on Thursday night is going to be a fun game to watch now. That's going to be a shootout now as well. So definitely, I like Bradford and Roethlisberger out of that group more than I do, say, a Kaepernick or a Cutler. I'm not really thrilled with those 2 because, again, Colin Kaepernick has been such a disappointment the last few years. San Francisco this year is going to be, I think, in terms of on the field, going to be a big question mark because, again, a lot of the guys left. The defensive side, new coach and Jim Tomsula. What is he going to bring to the table? And even though Minnesota not the best defensive unit, I think Minnesota is going to want to come out and make a statement against San Francisco. So I'm a little weary on Kaepernick. He's not even owned in my league, if that tells you something. He's not even owned. So it's just people are really, really leery on him. I am too. I would not have him that high. I would have him more of as a desperate QB2. Yes, his running ability is what makes him strong, but the weapons are limited, and I think Minnesota is going to want to come out and really prove something. So I'm leery on him, and of course, I'm leery on Cutler because not only because Cutler has struggled over the time, but what is the status of Alshon Jeffrey? We don't know. Chicago is keeping that a big secret, but he's been out so long with this cap issue. We don't know what his status is for Week 1. So if you own Alshon Jeffrey, you want to monitor that situation leading up to this week and look at the injury report. But it's just so odd. It's just an odd situation to have that question mark there. So odd. Jeffrey's availability. Now, obviously, if he doesn't play Martellus Bennett's going to get a lot of uptick in targets. Kevin White's already out for at least 6 weeks, if not more, with a shin issue. I don't know if they ruled him out for the season or not, but I knew it was a long time. So monitor that situation, but I'm just not a big fan of Cutler this week. More, again, of a QB2 for me than a QB1. But I love Bradford. I love Roethlisberger's matchups. And Rivers, I'd say borderline 1 or 2. But I would say I have Bradford and Roethlisberger ahead of them. Next 5, and again, we're really getting into kind of maybe deep QB2 range at this point. Joe Flacco, Andy Dalton, Matthew Stafford, Jameis Winston, Eli Manning. I'm actually surprised Stafford is that low on the list. I'm quite surprised, actually. San Diego, yes, he's on the road at San Diego, but their defense doesn't strike me as very strong. Now their secondary might with Eric Weddle back there, but Stafford still has Calvin Johnson, has Golden Tate as an emerging weapon. The young tight ends like Eric Ebron. Now he's going to have a dual threat back in the backfield and Abdullah. I'm surprised that Stafford is that low. I would actually prefer Stafford and Jameis Winston probably to Joe Flacco, and especially Andy. I'm surprised that Andy Dalton is higher than Matthew Stafford, Jameis Winston, and even Eli Manning. Are you freaking kidding me? Yeah, you're going up against the Raiders, and yeah, that's a nice matchup, but it's still Andy Dalton. I mean, and Andy Dalton has just been so hit and miss. It's just, I don't know if I can trust him even in juicy matchups. That's the thing. I don't know if I would prefer him to someone like a Matthew Stafford who's more reliable, or a Jameis Winston who has a great matchup going up against Tennessee. and their non-existent defense, or an Eli Manning against Dallas in a primetime game where usually the Giants do very well in that primetime game. So I would really reverse those around. I would have Stafford, Winston, and Manning and Eli definitely ahead of, and I would have Dalton as 5th on that list out of that group. I am not sold on Andy Dalton. I understand I mentioned that sometimes juicy matchups are a good thing, but when you have been so painfully inconsistent that, again, it makes us fantasy owners want to tear our hair out and scream, that is the thing that just confounds me to no end. And again, I understand he's got a weapon in A.J. Green, but outside of that, that's his only weapon. Tyler Eifert is going to be asked to do more at tight end, yes, but other than that, maybe okay, Marvin Jones is a wide receiver 3 or 4, but other than that, there's really no big weapons in Cincinnati outside of A.J. Green. So it just confounds me that he's rated that high, that he's rated above 3 quarterbacks that I feel right now at this moment are more reliable because A, they have the experience regarding to Stafford and Eli Manning, and B, they just have more weapons. Jameis Winston has a lot more to play with than does Andy Dalton. Jameis Winston has Vincent Jackson, Mike Evans, a tight end in Safarian Jenkins that I think is going to break out. You know, Doug Martin in the backfield. There's just more to work with there. And Tennessee's defense, I think, is a lot worse than Oakland. I understand Oakland's bad, but Tennessee's defense, you do remember that Tennessee lost the last 10 games of last season. They're on a 10-game losing streak entering this season. And even though that's why they got Marcus Mariota, they're really bad, okay? They're really bad. Their quarterback is a rookie. Their running backs are unproven. Bishop Sankey is terrible. David Cobb is hurt, who I thought was going to take over Sankey for the starting job. He's hurt. They signed Terrence West from Cleveland, for gosh sake. It is just, they don't have an elite wide receiver maybe outside of Justin Tucker and Kendall Hunter, who have had issues. I mean, it is just a mess. And so to have him ranked lower than Andy Dalton, please, that is embarrassing. That to me is ridiculous. I have Stafford, Winston, and Manning as guys you can definitely put in your lineup. I would trust them a lot more than I would Joe Flacco or Andy Dalton for the first week of the season. Speaking of Mariota, he's listed below Eli Manning, which I can understand. Then your next 5 are Mariota, Tyrod Taylor, Alex Smith, Drew Brees, and Blake Bortles. The only reason that Drew Brees is rated this low this week for the season is because of the tough matchup at Arizona. So if you don't have a better option on your roster, if you don't have a second quarterback on your roster that you have a lot of faith in, then, you know, that, or even has a better matchup. See, with me, I have Drew Brees and Teddy Bridgewater. And while Brees is drafted to be my starter, I'm a little leery this week because of that tough matchup at Arizona. And again, even though I think it's going to be a big time, potentially blowout game, I know that Arizona can come to play sometimes. Bruce Arians is no fool when it comes to defense. So I like the Bridgewater matchup going up against San Francisco a little better than I do the Brees matchup against Arizona. So that's plus Bridgewater's playing on Monday night, which I want to have as an advantage. So I want to play Bridgewater this week over Brees. I'm not going to do that very often, but sometimes when you have that decision where you're really kind of, okay, do I play a matchup or do I play, based on who I should start, you have to factor in everything. That's the big thing. So that's why in most situations I would probably start Drew Brees. But with this matchup this week, this situation where Bridgewater's playing on a Monday, I want to factor that in and have him available for the Monday night game. So tough matchup, Monday night game. That's why I'm starting Bridgewater this week over Brees. So I can understand why Brees is rated so low this week. But out of this bunch, I probably wouldn't recommend starting any of these guys over Drew Brees. Mariota against Tampa Bay, I know, because again, Tennessee's weapon's so unproven. You might be able to get away with Tyrod Taylor against the Bills or against the Colts, but again, the running ability, but again, very unproven. If any of those, the only one that maybe might be a better starting option is probably Alex Smith going up against Houston. Now, The Houston defense, again, is mainly J.J. Watt, and that's really it. That right now, that's really all that they have. So he's going to be the big thing. But the thing about Alex Smith that I like this year, that for Alex Smith wise, that he has a new toy in Jeremy Maclin. And Travis Kelce is expected to play week 1. From all indications that I've heard, he was banged up, he had the ankle issue. But from all that I've heard, he's expected to play week 1. So Alex Smith is going to have his 2 major weapons in the receiving corps for this week. So I think that's huge going up against Houston. So if I would play any of those in that group over Drew Brees, it would be Alex Smith. But other than that, I can't have Mariota ahead of him. I can't have Taylor ahead of him. And I certainly can't have Blake Bortles ahead of him for Jacksonville. Yeah, the Carolina defense is, not that great. But I wouldn't trust him in a situation over Brees. So kind of surprised with that grouping of players. But I like Smith this week as a pretty solid QB2. If you're concerned about Brees, that you can get away with starting him over Brees. But other than that, Mariota, Taylor, Bortles, not really thrilled with any of them. Maybe Taylor in a 2-quarterback league. But I wouldn't recommend starting Mariota or Bortles probably in any situation until they've proven themselves a little more. Then we get into the next 5, a couple running backs here, and then this a couple more underrated quarterbacks. The top 3 running backs are Eddie Lacy, Matt Forte, and Jamal Charles. I can't really disagree with any of those. Obviously, again, start your Packers. They're going to demolish the Bears, in my opinion. So Eddie Lacy is definitely a RB1 must start. Matt Forte, probably only going to because the Bears are going to be down mostly in this game. He's going to get a lot of touches and maybe stuff out of the backfield. So I think you're okay with Matt Forte this week. Jamal Charles against Houston, yes, definitely. That's a no-brainer. And the 2 quarterbacks there are Ryan Fitzpatrick of the Jets and Derek Carr of the Raiders. I actually think the Jets are going to beat the Browns this week, and I know that sounds surprising and crazy, but hear me out on this. I think the Browns are a lot more of a mess than the Jets are. Yes, Geno Smith is out for the first, 6 weeks of the season because of the broken jaw. But Ryan Fitzpatrick, here's the thing. Ryan Fitzpatrick has surprised us when he's been in situations where things have been a mess. He was actually somewhat successful in Buffalo, somewhat successful in Tennessee, and I think he's going to be somewhat successful here with the Jets. There are at least a few talented players surrounding Ryan Fitzpatrick. You've got Ivory at running back. You've got a couple decent options there. Even though Jason Morrow now is out for the year at tight end, Jeff Cumberland has shown in the past that he's been good. So I think the potential is there. The potential is there for Fitzpatrick to do some decent things. And again, the matchup with Cleveland. So now I wouldn't recommend him as like a must starting option. Maybe again as someone you can plug in 2 quarterback leagues, but certainly not a bad option. Now I wouldn't start Derek Carr yet because again, and everyone will be like, oh yeah, but he's got Amari Cooper now, yay! And Ladarius Murray is a backfield threat, yay! Wait until it pans out. Wait until, this is not exactly a dream matchup with Cincinnati. Cincinnati's defense is known to be tough in the past. So I really wouldn't put your faith. I wouldn't even put your faith in Derek Carr in 2 quarterback leagues. Wait until he develops a rapport with these guys. See what happens there from then on out. Next 5, Dez Bryant, Brian Hoyer, Marshawn Lynch, Josh McCown, Antonio Brown. I think 3 of those, again, are no-brainers. The only concern with Bryant was his hamstring issue. It was kind of bothering him during the last preseason game, but all signs are pointing to that Dez Bryant will be healthy and available for week 1. So as long as that is the case, you're starting Dez Bryant against the Giants. That's a no-brainer. You're definitely starting beast mode against the Rams. He's going to tear the Rams apart. The Rams normally are a pretty reliable defense, but if usually if you draft them to be your starting defense, I don't recommend playing him against the Seahawks. If you have a better defensive option with a better matchup, if it's someone that if you drafted a second defense with a better matchup, or if you can find a 1 week streamer to plug in, I think that'd be a better option this week for the Rams because the Seahawks, I think, are just going to tear the Rams apart. So beast mode is definitely a start, and of course Antonio Brown, the main option for Ben Roethlisberger going up against the Patriots. Yes, and now the Patriots don't have Darrelle Revis anymore, so Ben is a must start. Antonio Brown is a must start. So I think anyone outside, of course, of Le'Veon Bell, who's suspended for the first few games, and LeGarrette Blount. But outside of those guys, I think you can really start anybody Oh, and Martavius Bryant, who's suspended for the first 4. I think outside of those guys, you might even get away with Marcus Wheaton as a number 3 wide receiver. I think, because this game's going to be high scoring. I think this game's going to be fun. It's going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be intense. I think you can really start potentially any of the bigger name guys. Maybe not a Patriots running back because that situation is a mess without LeGarrette Blount. But any of those guys you can start. Now, again, the other 2 quarterbacks on that list, at this point, quarterbacks, you're really kind of digging for straws or stretching, reaching for straws, what I would say, not digging for straws. Why would you want to dig for a straw? I don't know. But at this point, you're really reaching because I wouldn't recommend starting Brian Hoyer against the Chiefs. The Texans quarterback situation is one of the worst in the NFL, if not the worst, outside of Cleveland. Maybe the Jets. I don't know, but it's a mess. Maybe Buffalo too, if you want to throw in that. But Brian Hoyer, while he did some nice things in Cleveland, he's not a elite quarterback option. Same with Josh McCown. Cleveland's situation is a mess now. Even though the Jets matchup is a little bit intriguing, I wouldn't even recommend that in 2 quarterback leagues. Next 5: DeMarco Murray, Julio Jones, Teddy Bridgewater, Nick Foles, Demaryius Thomas. I am surprised that Teddy Bridgewater below Brian Hoyer and Josh McCown. Are you freaking kidding me? No. Teddy Bridgewater is going to be one of the most improved quarterbacks this season. The weapons are amazing. He gets AP back. He's now got Mike Wallace. He's got a rapport with Charles Johnson. He's got Kyle Rudolph healthy. No, that is embarrassing. That is an embarrassment above all embarrassments. Even bigger than the one I mentioned earlier. To have Teddy Bridgewater ranked below Brian Hoyer and Josh McCown. No, that is completely unreliable. I would have Bridgewater much higher than them. I'd have Bridgewater above Josh McCown, above Brian Hoyer, definitely above Derek Carr, definitely above Ryan Fitzpatrick. That is embarrassing. Teddy Bridgewater is a great, I'd say even low-end 1 QB2 this week. I'm surprised he is rated that low. And Nick Foles is 1 spot below him, and he's going up against Seattle. Give me a break. Nick Foles needs to be way down the list. It's his first game in St. Louis. They're going to have an unknown running back named Benny Cunningham at running back because Trey Mason probably won't play because of the hamstring. Todd Gurley's already out for a few weeks because still recovering from the ACL. Unknown commodities at wide receiver, except for Brian Quick. I mean, no. Just absolutely no. I don't agree with that at all. Now, the other guys, these are must-start guys. Yes, you're starting your Eagles against the Falcons. DeMarco Murray is a must-start. Julio Jones against Philly, yes, a must-start. And Demaryius Thomas against Baltimore, yes. All those guys, good options for you this week. But to have Bridgewater that low in the quarterback rankings is an embarrassment. And not just because he's on my fantasy team. And not just because I'm starting him. I like what I've seen from Teddy Bridgewater. You might not want to judge too much in preseason, but Teddy Bridgewater looked awesome in the preseason too. So that to me is just laughable. Next 5 here, and all these guys are double-digit projection for the week based on CBS, so just to let you know that. C.J. Anderson, Randall Cobb, Justin Forsett, Lamar Miller, Odell Beckham. I can't really, poo-poo any of these guys. I think all of these are pretty solid options. Again, I think C.J. Anderson, yes, is definitely a must-start. He's going to be the main guy in Denver. Now, the only concern with C.J. Anderson, and I'm concerned for him too because he's on my fantasy team too, the only concern is that they're really hyping up Ronnie Hillman. They're really hyping him up now to be the number 2 guy, now that Monty Ball's gone. He's leapfrogged Juwan Anderson. Now that he's clearly the number 2 guy, there's a lot of speculation that he's going to, mix in carries with Anderson. He's going to have an opportunity to get the starting job. So that is concerning. But for now, CJ has the main job. He's going to be every opportunity to get the number 1. For now, he is the guy. But it does concern me a little bit about Ronnie Hillman. So just want to monitor that as the season goes on. If you own CJ Anderson like myself, it is something to monitor as the season goes on. So we just want to keep that in mind. But for now, safe RB1 starting option. Same with Justin Forsett. He's the main guy in Baltimore. You don't want to sit him, even though the matchup with Denver might be a little bit tough. You definitely want to start him. But again, I think I would have Lamar Miller in Miami ahead of both of them because, again, the juicy matchup going up against Washington. Lamar Miller is definitely someone you can plug into your lineup as a solid, I think, RB1, at least for this week. Normally, he would be more of an RB2, but definitely an RB1 for this week because, again, the juicy matchup with Washington. And Randall Cobb and Odell Beckham are as reliable as it's going to be. They're going to, they're now the top options in Green Bay and the Giants. So all these guys, those 5, are solid RB1 options and wide receiver 1 options this week. But in terms of the running backs, I like Lamar Miller a little bit more than I do C.J. Anderson and Justin Forsett if you're facing a dilemma between those guys. Next 5, Adrian Peterson, Rob Gronkowski, A.J. Green, Andre Ellington, Latavius Murray. The first 3 you're starting regardless of matchup. AP's back. Good to have him back, even though the whole situation with that, of course, again, was a mess. But again, the NFL screwing up. But good to see him back. Minnesota's offense is so much better with him there, so he is a must-start regardless. Rob Gronkowski, Brady's, of course, looks for him a lot, especially in the red zone, so he's a no-brainer. He's obviously the top tight end. And A.J. Green, and even though I said I'm not thrilled with Dalton, again, he's the top option there in Cincinnati until proven otherwise, so you're not sitting A.J. Green. But the last 2 interesting running backs, Andre Ellington and Latavius Murray. I hate to say it, but I like Murray a little more in between the 2 in that. Because, again, the concern with Andre Ellington is his workload and being healthy. That's really been the big concern. Why would the Cardinals give Chris Johnson a shot and have these and have I think there's a younger running back behind him in David Johnson? Why would they draft David Johnson? Why would they give Chris Johnson a shot if they were not concerned about the health of Andre Ellington and his workload? That just concerns me a little bit. So while the guys in the Saints-Cardinals matchup are going to be productive fantasy players, I'm a little weary on Ellington. I would have Murray ranked probably a couple spots ahead of him because, again, Latavius Murray, this dual threat back, this quick running back in Oakland, and while the matchup against Cincinnati may not be ideal, I just think that the potential there is more with Murray going forward than with Ellington. So at least for this week, I like Latavius Murray a little bit more than I do Ellington. Just monitor Ellington. If you're an Ellington owner and you want to take that risk, just be a little wary. I would just be a little bit concerned there. Next 5, Calvin Johnson, Kirk Cousins, Melvin Gordon, Jeremy Hill, Mike Evans. Calvin Johnson, for me, again, is a no-brainer. Calvin Johnson is a no-brainer. And really, he's, I think, really the only no-brainer out of this bunch. Wide receiver 1. He's Matthew Stafford's security blanket. He's his main option. Surprised he was projected for only 11 points in a CBS league. I've seen a lot of other sites that have him for much, much higher point projection. A little surprised with that. Melvin Gordon, again, the only worry I have, again, is his preseason numbers. But again, I think still a solid RB2 for this week. But if there are better options out there, better matchups, I think you can definitely start them over Melvin Gordon. Jeremy Hill, I think, is someone that you can start over Melvin Gordon. Jeremy Hill is definitely someone I think you can start because, again, the great matchup with Oakland. I think Jeremy Hill is going to get a ton of work in that matchup. So I would actually have Jeremy Hill ahead of Melvin Gordon. I think Jeremy Hill would be a better if you own Melvin Gordon and Jeremy Hill, or if you have Jeremy Hill on your bench and he's normally RB3. I think you can start him above. That's a situation again where kind of like me with Doug Martin. I think that's a situation where you can start Jeremy Hill over at Melvin Gordon. In fact, let me look at the next few running backs on this list and see guys that I could potentially see starting over Melvin Gordon. I'll look at the next few running backs on this list and see. So Jeremy Hill, I say yes. TJ Yeldon. TJ Yeldon's a tough call because, again, it's Jacksonville. And the running backs really in Jacksonville have not panned out. And going up against Carolina, tough matchup. I would say no to that one. I would say no to TJ Yeldon. It's really a coin flip between Gordon and Yeldon, but I would say no. Joique Bell, I would say no because, again, Joique Bell's availability is in question for week 1. He just came off the PUP list being banged up. Rashad Jennings, I would say Rashad Jennings of the Giants, I'd say, is one you could start over Melvin Gordon. Rashad Jennings is going to be the main guy in the Giants' backfield this season. Now, there's going to be some workload taken away from like Shane Vereen and Andre Williams at the goal line, but I still think Jennings is going to be capable. I'd say yes. I think you could start him over Melvin Gordon. Benny Cunningham, no. You don't want to start him against over Melvin Gordon. The Rams are going to get destroyed by the Seahawks defense, no. Carlos Hyde, maybe. That's another tough call. Carlos Hyde is giving every chance now to own the 49ers backfield. But, over Melvin Gordon, that's tough. So I would lean no, but it's a tough call there. Ryan Matthews, no. Brandon Bolden, no. D'Angelo Williams, no. Joseph Randle, no. Again, the Cowboys' backfield too muddy. But then the next one here though is Chris Ivory, and that's a tough one because Chris Ivory again is going to be every chance to be the Jets' main back, and the matchup with Cleveland is juicy. So that's a very tough call too. That'd be tough. That'd be a tough one. And Frank Gore. Frank Gore is low on this list. Frank Gore over I would definitely, you know what? I'll say yes to Chris Ivory. I'll say yes to Chris Ivory and Frank Gore over Melvin Gordon just because of how reliable they've been in the past. So I would say yes to both those guys. I'd say yes to Jonathan Stewart over Melvin Gordon because, again, the matchup with Jacksonville. For gosh sakes, I'd say yes to Alfred Blue of Houston against Kansas City over Melvin Gordon. Now, maybe not Giovanni Bernard, maybe not Alfred Morris or Mark Ingram, but then the next name is Doug Martin. And I would say potentially yes, Doug Martin over Melvin Gordon. So there's a lot of intriguing names that potentially you could start over Melvin Gordon if you fear that Melvin Gordon, the way he has looked in the preseason, is not up to snuff. So there's a lot of potential names. So if you have any of those dilemmas, keep those names in mind. But I think certainly there's a lot of guys that are listed below him here that I would prefer over Melvin Gordon just based on their matchups and their reliability, their veteran presence in previous years. Mike Evans, the only concern I have with Mike Evans is the hamstring issue. Will he play this week? If he plays, I think he's obviously a must-start against Tennessee. You're going to want to start your Buccaneers against that Tennessee defense. So as long as Mike Evans is healthy and he plays, he will be a solid wide receiver 1. I mentioned Pittsburgh Steelers and Steelers Patriots. Julian Edelman, yes, start him this week as well. Then after that, their next 5 are T.J. Yeldon, Jordan Matthews, Alshon Jeffrey, Joique Bell, Rashad Jennings. I like Jordan Matthews the most out of that bunch. Jordan Matthews, to me, again, is a wide receiver 1, elite, must start. Again, the matchup with Atlanta, too juicy. The Eagles are going to go off this week. So, love Jordan Matthews. I think he's going to be the stud there. Now, Nelson Aguilar, the rookie, is also going to get, I think, his share. And you've got Zach Ertz, a tight end, if he plays, if he's healthy. But for the most part, I think Jordan Matthews is going to get every opportunity to be the guy now that Deshaun Jackson is gone, now that Macklin's gone. He's going to have every opportunity to be the number 1 guy. So, yes, I love Jordan Matthews this week. I like him. Probably is the safest bet out of that bunch because I'm not thrilled with Yeldon, as I just mentioned. Jeffrey, the concern is will he play or not? If he plays, then obviously I think you treat him as a wide receiver 2, not really an elite option this week because, again, will he be on a snap count? What's his situation going against Green Bay, the tough matchup. But I like him as a decent starting option and the same as long as he plays. But I'm not thrilled with Yeldon. I'm not thrilled with Joique Bell in Detroit because, again, he just came off the PUP list. What's his health status going to be? You've got Amir Abdullah now in that backfield, going to challenge him for carries, and potentially a waiver wire guy to look forward down the line is Zach Zenner further on down the line. So that could be a name we talk about later on in the season. But I'm a little weary on him right now. I would probably rank Rashad Jennings ahead of T.J. Yeldon and Joique Bell. I'd probably rate those 5. Matthews for sure. Rashad Jennings, I think you can get away starting Rashad Jennings as an RB2 this week as well. Then I'd probably have Bell, Jeffrey, Yeldon. That's how I'd rate those 5. Because, again, it all depends on their availability with Bell and Jeffrey. And Yeldon I'm just not fond of until he proves himself in that Jacksonville backfield. Next 5, Benny Cunningham, Michael Floyd, Carlos Hyde, Roddy White, Jarvis Landry. I think the safest bet out of that bunch is Jarvis Landry. Again, I love the Dolphins this week. I love their matchup. This is probably one of the best matchups. If you have Dolphins on your roster, this is probably one of the best matchups to exploit all year against Washington. Start these guys. So I think out of that bunch, Jarvis Landry is the safest bet. I think you can definitely start Carlos Hyde as an RB2 as well. I like him second out of that bunch. And again, the concern is with Michael Floyd and Roddy White. Are they going to play? Michael Floyd has the finger issue. Roddy White has the elbow issue. Normally, these are guys that probably you could start as strong wide receiver 2s. But again, their availability is in question for this week. So now they have great matchups going up against the Saints and the Eagles. But again, it's the availability. And Roddy White, we know, is getting up there in age, and he's been banged up for years. And clearly, Julio Jones is stealing the spotlight away from him. So that's a concern. But other than that, you're looking at those guys, as long as they're available, yes, you can probably play them as wide receiver 2s. But if they are ruled out, then obviously you won't be able to have them this week. So just keep that in mind. Benny Cunningham, I'm surprised he's projected for as many points as he is, for like 9 points. I don't even think he gets to that against Seattle. And Seattle defense is too strong. It's a mess at running back there. You're not going to touch that. I wouldn't if I were you. Next 5, Ryan Matthews, T.Y. Hilton, Jimmy Graham, Golden Tate, Brandon Bolden. T.Y. Hilton, Jimmy Graham, definitely must-start safe bets. Wide receiver 1, tight end 1s. A lot of the talk with Jimmy Graham obviously has been, will his targets go down because Seattle's not much of a throwing team and New Orleans was. And yes, I do agree that Jimmy Graham's targets are going to go down, but he's going to be a reliable option in the red zone just like always. He's going to be a go-to guy to look for from Russell Wilson in the end zone. So he's still going to be that strong elite tight end you've been drafting in past years. So I think he certainly is, again, a safe play against the Rams this week. So those 2 are the safest bets out of that group. Golden Tate, I think you could probably use as a strong wide receiver 2. He's really come along strong. Now, he may not be fully relevant unless Calvin Johnson goes down, but I still think you get away with him as a wide receiver 2 or 3 there as well. So I think he's a good play. I'm worried about Ryan Matthews and Brandon Bolden because, again, there's DeMarco Murray. Yeah, he might be able to handle the whole workload in Philadelphia. But, what's Matthews' role going to be? Darren Sproles is obviously going to be the third down back, but what's Matthews' role really going to be in this offense? That's what concerns me going forward. So, a little weird on him. And I'm not using a Patriots running back till LeGarrette Blount comes back, unless we see who takes that third down position, whether it's, because James White, Tavares Cadet, those guys, until we see who takes that role, in maybe in a PPR league, for instance, or something like that, or even, just as depth stash, I really don't want to really use a Patriots running back until LeGarrette Blount comes back. So I'm not really thrilled with him. Now, the thing about D'Angelo Williams, he will be the starter in the Pittsburgh backfield while Le'Veon Bell is suspended for those first few games. And that's fine, but again, the thing about D'Angelo Williams, the issue has been his reliability. Can he handle being the top back in an offense? Can he handle the workload? And he showed that in Carolina he did some good things and was able to do, okay there. But will he handle the situation in Pittsburgh? That's my concern with D'Angelo Williams. So maybe more of a desperate RB2-3 play if you have no better options. If you picked him up off waivers, to cover Le'Veon Bell as a handcuff, then maybe if you have no better options out there. But I'm not thrilled with him. Then the next 4 are all wide receivers. Amari Cooper, Jeremy Maclin, Nelson Aguilar, Anquan Bolden. Out of that bunch, I actually like Jeremy Maclin the most. Kansas City will not have a year like last year where no receivers scored touchdowns. Jeremy Maclin's not going to let that happen, okay? Jeremy Maclin is going to, I think, be really, really strong in Kansas City. So I like him this week with the matchup against Houston. I like him slightly more than Cooper. Again, Cooper and Carr have to develop that rapport with each other. So I like him. I probably would have him ahead of Cooper. Cooper, I think, is more of a desperate wide receiver 3. Same with Aguilar, a wide receiver 3 territory, and same with Anquan Bolden. Because again, with Kaepernick, you just never know. So really with those rankings, I don't really have any thoughts on it. But I like Maclin the best out of that bunch until the others really prove themselves. Next 5, John Brown, Joseph Randle, DeAndre Hopkins, Vincent Jackson, Keenan Allen. I probably like, out of that bunch, the most, I'd probably say, again, I like Vincent Jackson. I like the Buccaneers this week. I like, yes, Mike Evans is going to be the top guy as long as he's healthy, but if he doesn't play, then Vincent Jackson becomes an elite wide receiver 1 for this week. So, but even though I still like him as a wide receiver 2, so I love Vincent Jackson this week. I really like him. I'd say yes, you can start him. I think you can get away with starting John Brown for the Cardinals against the Saints as a wide receiver 3. I think John Brown's going to surprise a lot of people this year. I think I have him as a really strong, uprising wide receiver. I think he's going to be very strong. So I like him second out of this group. Then I'd have Keenan Allen third, then DeAndre Hopkins, and then, again, the Cowboys situation. Yes, Joseph Randle is probably going to be the first guy in Dallas to get cracks at running back. But you've got now this muddy backfield with him, with Darren McFadden, with Lance Dunbar, and now with Christine Michael in the mix. So it just worries me a little bit. So he's going to get every opportunity to be the number 1 guy. But what will he do with that? Will he be a reliable number 1? Will he be, by it's all said and done, the guy in the Dallas backfield? Until that mystery sorts itself out, I would stray away from Cowboy running backs until the situation sorts itself out. Next 5, Doug Baldwin, Chris Ivory, Brandon Cooks, Andre Johnson, Sammy Watkins. I love Brandon Cooks. I love seeing what this kid, and I know he was still young, this kid has done in preseason. I think he is going to be a huge weapon for Drew Brees. And every site I'm reading is saying, Drew Brees is going to be down this year because he lost this guy, he lost this guy, he lost Jimmy Graham, he lost this guy, he lost all these people. Yeah, okay, but he has Brandon Cooks. He still has Marcus Colston. He lost Kenny Stills. Okay, he lost those weapons, yes. But Brandon Cooks, from what I've seen, Brandon Cooks is coming on strong. Colston's still there. Brandon Coleman is emerging as a good number 3 wide receiving threat. There's going to be a tight end that emerges from that group, whether it's Josh Hill or somebody else. There's still talent there, okay? So it's not going to be a big drop-off for Brees, number 1. And number 2, from all I've seen from Brandon Cooks, I love this guy. So Brandon Cooks, to me, I think is a solid wide receiver 2-3 for this week. I like him the most out of this group. I like Andre Johnson. I would put him right below him. Again, yes, the wide receiver situation in Indianapolis is very crowded because you've got T.Y. Hilton there. You've got the young guy Dorsett. You've got Dante Moncrief. There's a lot of mouths to feed in Indianapolis. But I still think Johnson's going to get his opportunities there, so I have him right below Cooks. Then I'll probably put Baldwin at 3 because, again, of the really good matchup with St. Louis. Then Sammy Watkins, and then Chris Ivory. But only because, again, Chris Ivory, yes, is a good option against Cleveland. He's going to get, he's projected for 8 points. I think he could at least crack 10, 11 double digits. I think that, again, great matchup with Cleveland. I think the Jets are going to win that game. So I'm looking forward for big things from him. But the wideouts, I think, are a little bit stronger there. And I think they also have really good matchups here as well. Next 5 are Frank Gore, Jonathan Stewart, Alfred Blue, Giovanni Bernard, and Alfred Morris. Again, I mentioned I like all 3 of those first 3 running backs. I think all those guys are startable options this week. Again, Frank Gore, now the main guy in the Colts backfield. Jonathan Stewart, great matchup with Jacksonville. Alfred Blue, filling in for the injured Arian Foster. He's shown that he can do well with the job in the past. So I think all those guys are very, very solid RB2s. I'm surprised they are this low on CBS's ratings. I'm surprised at that. I think all those guys, again, those are all guys I mentioned you can start over Melvin Gordon if you're worried about Melvin Gordon. I think all those guys are reliable options for you this week. Now, Gio Bernard and Alfred Morris, I'm not sold too much on because, again, Gio Bernard is more of a second fiddle to Jeremy Hill. So even though the matchup's good against Oakland, I'm not, maybe in PPR leagues you can get with him as an RB2 because of his dual threat skills. But really, as a RB2 in standard leagues, I really can't see it. More of an RB3 there. And Alfred Morris, again, while usually a pretty good option, there's, a little bit, Miami's defense now is stronger with Ndamukong Suh there. And the fact that, Matt Jones is coming on strong. That's another guy you might want to have on your waiver wire speed dial. Matt Jones of Washington. The guy's looked really good in the preseason and come on strong. So, not really too sold on him. More, again, of an RB2, RB3. Next 5, Mark Ingram, Larry Fitzgerald, Terrence Williams, Doug Martin, Isaiah Crowell. I again, Doug Martin's matchup is juicy this week. Now, the only concern again with Doug Martin is, will he take this opportunity and literally run with it? Doug Martin, of course, has been really, really bad the past few seasons. Nothing like his rookie year where he broke out and was amazing. And I had him on my team then, too, and I picked him up off of waivers because I read all these good things about Doug Martin. So I'm hoping that the Doug Martin of old literally comes back this season. And again, the great matchup with Tennessee, I like that. So I would have him rated, you know, again, RB2, RB3 borderline this week if you're in a pinch at running back. Again, a guy that could potentially start over Melvin Gordon, I really think. So then I'd probably have Mark Ingram at 2 out of that group. Again, RB2, RB3 territory. Larry Fitzgerald, I think, is more of a wide receiver 2-3 at this point. Not the elite option he was, but again, will still produce with Carson Palmer as long as he's healthy under center. Terrence Williams, more of a wide receiver 3. And the Cleveland backfield, again, I would avoid until a true number 1 emerges. They just got rid of Terrence West. They just shipped him off to Tennessee. I thought Terrence West was going to be the guy in Cleveland, but again, it's Cleveland, so what, you know, what do I know? But I thought that would happen. But now you've only got Isaiah Crowell and Duke Johnson. That's pretty much all you have. And Duke Johnson, I think, is banged up with the hamstring issue himself. So Crowell's going to have every opportunity to start here, but it's just a muddy situation. So I'm not thrilled with the Cleveland backfield until someone really sorts themselves out. And then the next group, Dwayne Bowe, Brandon Marshall, Travis Kelce. Again, good to know that Travis Kelce in all likelihood will play healthy. As long as he plays week 1, I think you can get away with him as a borderline tight end 1, tight end 2 for the game against Houston this week. I'm not really thrilled with Dwayne Bowe or Brandon Marshall. Maybe more so Brandon Marshall than Dwayne Bowe because, again, the Cleveland situation, not pretty. I think the Jets are going to do well this week. So maybe Brandon Marshall can get away with as a wide receiver 3. Let Ryan Fitzpatrick develop that rapport with him to see what happens there. All right, now at this point, we're really digging into deep sleepers on this next list. Greg Olsen of Carolina, I'm surprised only projected for 7 points against Jacksonville. He's going to see a lot of targets with Kellen Benjamin out. I think you can get away with Greg Olsen as a borderline tight end 1, tight end 2 this week, considering the great matchup. Kendall Wright at Tennessee. Marcus Mariota's got to throw the ball to somebody. I mean, seriously. Some number 1 wide receiver has to emerge in Tennessee for Marcus Mariota. It just has to happen. So if anybody, Kendall Wright has the best chance. So maybe a desperate wide receiver 3 or 4. Darren Sproles, I only would, again, like in PPR leagues. Again, maybe more of a flex play or an RB3 until we see what he's going to do in this Philly offense. Crowded Philly backfield now. Don't start Amir Abdullah just yet. I have him on my team. I'm hoping for big things from him. I'm hoping he ends up being the number 1 running back in Detroit. But until Joyke Bell is still in the picture, you really can't put too much faith or see what he's going to do in the regular season. Yeah, he had a great preseason, but you really don't want to put too much stock in that, literally, until we see what he can do in the regular season. So don't keep him on your bench for depth, but don't start Amir Abdullah just yet. Martellus Bennett, if Alshon Jeffrey is out, then Martellus Bennett becomes, I think, a strong tight end 1. For now, only treat him as a tight end 2. Allen Robinson, more of a wide receiver 3 or 4. Again, Blake Bortles has to throw the ball to somebody, and he seems like the most elite option in Jacksonville. But again, only if you're really, really desperate. I wouldn't touch the Atlanta running back situation until, again, a clear number 1 emerges. But it looks like for now it's going to be a committee between Devontae Freeman and the rookie Tevin Coleman out of IU. It's going to be real tricky there. So for now, I wouldn't touch that situation. Again, after that, not a lot of big names. Maybe you can get away with Greg Jennings as a wide receiver 3 or 4 against Washington. Maybe Danny Amendola as a desperate wide receiver 4 against Pittsburgh. If you're desperate at tight end, I think to look for Heath Miller. This is a great matchup with Pittsburgh and New England. So Heath Miller, potentially there is a very interesting option there. Again, you could get away with Marcus Colston as a desperate wide receiver 3 or 4 as well. Eddie Royal becomes a viable option in Chicago also if Alshon Jeffrey is out, so monitor that situation. For now, more of a wide receiver 3 or 4, but if his stock will certainly rise this week if Alshon Jeffrey doesn't play. LaShawn McCoy at running back for Buffalo. Again, he's very banged up. The big thing is, will he play? If he does, I think he's definitely a decent RB2. If not, I wouldn't touch any of the backup Buffalo running backs. I'm surprised Devontae Adams is this low. Devontae Adams is only projected for 6 points. I'm really surprised at that. So I would say Devontae Adams is a very solid starting option. Ruben Randall of the Giants. If Victor Cruz is out, if he does not play, as many people are sort of projecting, then Ruben Randall gets a big rise in target, so he could have a breakout week as well. Other than that, I'm not really seeing any other big names here out of this group to really look for. Of course, Ladarius Green at San Diego, he'll have every opportunity to get the starting tight end job. So again, if you're desperate at tight end, maybe a tight end 2, you'll look to Ladarius Green. Same with Delaney Walker, good matchup, so maybe a tight end 2 for you there. A guy to monitor going forward is Devontae Parker in Miami. Again, that Miami offense with, the foot issue, of course, is a concern, but if he gets targets from Ryan Tannehill, watch out for Devontae Parker. I mentioned James White if he becomes that third down back in New England. Zach Ertz, if he's healthy in Philadelphia at tight end, I think he could be a name that could surprise later on. I'm interested to see what C.J. Spiller's role is going to be in that Saints backfield, but for now, just monitor that. Don't plug him in this week. Again, what's James Jones going to do in Green Bay? What's Shane Vereen's role going to be in the Giants backfield? Again, Brandon Coleman, a name you need to monitor going forward as well with the Saints. But other than that, no real big other recommendations here to play out of this bunch this week. All right, guys, that is it. I know a little bit different way. I know originally said in the format I was going to break down by position, but I feel like just going down and monitoring that way and highlighting matchups, I think is a little bit better, at least for me to easily monitor it and everything. So a lot of matchups, a lot of good matchups to play your guys in. Steelers, Patriots, Saints and Cardinals. Start your Seahawks against the Rams. Start your Chiefs against the Texans. Start your Eagles against the Falcons. Start your Panthers against the Jags. So that's basically it in a nutshell. So again, thank you guys so much as always for watching, for subscribing. You guys are the reason again why I do this show. Not only because I love the game and I love playing it and I love winning championships. Now won 2. But because of the fact that you guys are really into it. So thank you guys so much for that again. If you have any comments regarding your lineup dilemmas and decisions for week 1, please, as always, feel free to leave them in the comment box below, or you can even leave them on the channel if you so desire. I will check my Gmail throughout the week to see if you guys are making any asking any questions, have some dilemmas of your own to face this week, players who you might think are going to either star this week or disappoint. Let me know what you think. Thank you guys again so much for your support. Thank you to all you. I appreciate it so much. And good luck this week. Go out there and get a win. You always want to start the season again on the right foot, and hopefully we have a say and have some bearing to your success this week. So hopefully I will do the same as well. For my team, you always want to start with a win. Thank you guys. Feel free again to share your questions. We'll see you next week for the Week 2 preview. We'll recap Week 1, of course, and we'll preview the Week 2 edition of the Fantasy Football Stock Report, the home for your team, your league, your game, your home. See you next week.